We have made outstanding progress when it comes to collecting most, if not all, the pearls in Rain World thus far. There's still a lot more to go, obviously, from the sides of all these question marks, but in terms of the base game pearls, I think we're well on our way. To my knowledge, there should be maybe a handful of pearls remaining, give or take. I'm not fully sure. I'm kind of just going off of what people tell me, so if everyone's been lying to me, then everyone's been lying to me. But the fact that we already have quite a few pearls is not the important part that I want to bring up, because we already are on our way, as we speak, into getting quite a couple more pearls. If we make our way back to Industrial, which I'm aiming to do right as we speak, we should be on our way to getting 5 more pearls. And then ideally from there will be a lot more lore to read over. But at least for now, the goal for today, the battle plan for this episode, because it seems like at this point nearly every single episode has to have a battle plan. The battle plan for this episode, we are going to go ahead and make our way through from Shoreline all the way over to Industrial. Grab the pearls that are remaining in Industrial, bring them back over using a passage to here with Moon. And then once we complete that, perhaps it'll finally be time to fulfill my job that 5 have put me on in the first place. And then once we get to that point, I think that will be a great time to go over quite a bit, if not all the lore we have discovered thus far. But ideally, first and foremost, we need to get across this body of water, and this guy is waiting there right for me. Because, of course, I feel like my steps and my routines tend to be one and the same quite consistently. But honestly, is there any other more concise method than the one that I have right now? So for the most part, I'm probably gonna head up towards Shaded, through Shaded, into Industrial, passage back through. Remember that there are leeches here. Oh, that's a problem. No. With any luck, we should be able to make it all the way to Shaded on just one cycle. Fingers crossed. Despite what the music wants you to believe, I'm doing just fine for myself, I'll have you know. I didn't die at all. There's no problems whatsoever. I'm fine. So now here from the end of Shoreline entering Shaded, we'll go through Shaded. If I see Pancake, I'll let you guys know, but otherwise, it should be a clear shot. No way! No way! Pancake! Oh my gosh, hi! Yes, of course you can have that. Oh my gosh, no effing way! It's been so long. I miss you so much, Pancake. I wish I could stay and chat with you and just tell you all the stuff I've discovered and all the places I've been to. Unfortunately for me, I have to focus on getting through the darkness and all these ever so delightful creatures of the night. Ooh, it's always fun to be here. It's always fun to be here. I'm so happy we finally got to see Pancake again. It feels like it's been so long. I finally made it to the hibernation spot just before the toaster gate leading into an industrial complex. I managed to kill one of those black mole-looking lizard things, which I'm pretty proud of. Overall, I think that's one of my best trips through the Shaded Citadel as a whole. It just went super smoothly. So luckily, the next part is easy. Or at least in theory, it should be easy. All I really need to do and want to do is stock up on some food, go through the toaster gate, and immediately hibernate again so that I can pass right through. So once I finish doing that, I'll meet you guys back at the toaster. All right. Moment of truth. Here's the time. Here's the moment. Here is the so very crowded room. Oh my gosh. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and passage one more time. Key items enabled. We're taking 5 more pearls, or at least I think 5 more pearls, over to Moon again. Oh! This one looks intense. The Chieftain. Oh, is this the one that's associated with the scavengers? You know what? Kind of fitting that I'm using this one after I finally got to meet my friend again. The passages are really cool, but also kind of creepy. There's something about them that just makes you feel a little sad. I'm not sure. Now, that being said, someone pointed out something in the comment section that I wanted to quickly acknowledge because I thought that is an absolutely good idea. This room right here, the room right before Moon, is getting very, very crowded. But there is another hibernation spot not too far away. What I might end up doing, which is tedious for me, but not at all tedious for you guys, is I'm probably going to start passaging my way to this room, and then I'll hand the pearls over to Moon, talk to her, and drop them off at the storage room, per se. because that was starting to get all too crowded, and trying to like shift through 1,000 different pearls and memorize what colors are which, it's really starting to get to me. But without further ado, let's do this one more time. Yep, 5 more pearls to consider and a whole lot more talking to do. So without further ado, I'll see you guys when I meet back up with Emily. Hello again, little archaeologist. Oh, is that my nickname now? I dig it. I like that nickname. I got some pearls for you. A new gift for me, little creature. Oh, I'm not an archaeologist anymore. And yet another one. I will read it to you. This information is illegal. Someone probably tried to send it by pearl somehow rather than risking being overheard on broadcast. I think the risk you are acting on is very slim, so I'll go ahead and explain it to you. It's an instruction on how to circumvent the self-destruction taboo. The problem with breaking taboos is that the barriers are encoded into every cell of our organic parts, and there are other taboos strictly regulating our ability to rewrite our own genome. So what you need is to somehow create a small sample of living organic matter which can procreate and act on the rest of your organic matter to rewrite its genome. The rewrite has to be very specific, overriding the specific taboo you want to circumvent but do nothing else. The method described here is about scrambling the genome of standard plastic neural tissue with temperature fluctuations. After each scramble, you browse the resulting cells for the genome you're after. This is of course extremely time consuming, unless you run a big number of parallel processes. I definitely don't have any experiments with this, but to me it would seem that too many parallel processes would be quite dangerous, as it would be exponentially more difficult to manage and control them all. The whole operation seems rather risky if you ask me. It might be a good thing that this pearl never reached its destination. Is that so? Oh, I will look at it. Here we go again, little archaeologist. Let's read your pearl. Its entire memory is filled with a mantra repeated 5,061 times, and then a termination verse. It was worn as an amulet, probably together with many identical others, forming a pattern of some sort. The repeating mantra is important because it symbolizes the cynical nature of life and death, and the termination verse is a symbol of ascension above and beyond it. I don't know how familiar you are with the nature of life and death, but I imagine, like all living creatures, you have some intuitive knowledge? Then you know that death isn't the end. Birth and death are connected to each other like a ring. Or some say a spiral. Some say a spiral that in turn forms a ring. Some ramble in agonizing longevity, but the basis is agreed upon. Like sleep, like death, you wake up again, whether you want to or not. This is true for all living things, but some actually break the cycle. That doesn't apply to you or me though. You are too entangled in your animal struggles, and for me, not breaking that cycle is an integral part of the design. Our mantras keep repeating. Oh, I will look at it. And yet another one. I'll read it to you. It's a production record for a mask factory for what seems to be the last time in service. Have you seen a bone mask? Likely not. They're gone with their owners. In ancient time, the masks were actually about showing spiritual persuasion, covering the face as a way to symbolically abate the self. Then of course, that was quite subverted as excessively ornate and lavish masks became the expression of identity. Some public persons did have problems with narrow doorways. Originally, monks in a temple would make a mask using bone plaster, and when the production was automated, it would generally remain on the same site, so that the own stones could radiate the materials with holiness, I suppose. This is from one such facility called Sidehouse, which was here on Pebbles grounds. In the Iterator projects, many old industrial religious sites like these were remodded and incorporated. I think this one was made to provide pellets of holy ash to Pebbles, but knowing him, he probably hasn't used much of it. Hello again, little archaeologist. And hello to you too. 2 more pearls for you. Something new you want me to look at, little creature? The scavengers must be jealous of you finding all of these. This one has plain text. Let me cut the lengthy introductions. We will not consider the current situation acceptable. Although our community is blessed with an ever-shrinking population, we can almost glimpse that glorious moment when the last of us have joined our most admired peers. We must all still, at all times, maintain good relations with our iterator. The moral argument, 5 Pebbles, is our creation. and we have parental obligations towards him. As an iterator, he is also a gift of charity from us to the world, unable to reach enlightenment by itself, being composed mostly of rock, gas, dull-witted bugs, and microbes, and towards the practical augment. Despite you being found me, I must beg forgiveness of the blunt vulgarity. We are, for as long as we remain dependent on 5 pebbles for water, nectar, energy, void fluid, and all other vital resources. By now, living on the surface is laughable. We have crossed a river and have kicked out the root. I therefore ask you to do anything in your might to stop the house, we both know which house, from further obstruction. They have less than 40 members on the council, but still tilt the spiritual discourse with our iterator in a direction that most obviously displeases him, and is hardly high held by anyone in the community either. We cannot risk this. And then there are polite farewells. None of us really missed the times when their cities were populated. Imagine having skin parasites that also ask for advice and have opinions. I'm sorry, that was disrespectful. They were our parents after all. This one, it's authored by 5 Pebbles when he was young. There has been an attempt to scramble the data, but it's sloppily done. Most is still somewhat legible. It's written in internal language, or thought, so it's hard for me to translate so you would understand. Its methodology for global ascension, of course, quite good, though the peripherals or the slab monger certainly wouldn't agree. Considering the 8th and the 26th amendments to the capacious dogma, we are currently supposed to take for granted that the meaning of collector point inversion is the only way to approach what has later become referred to as noise milking or occasionally rock swatting. I will argue my disagreement with this, not in regards to kinds, but regards to, could it say, volume? Actually, are you getting any out of this? I suppose he found us in his waste department. I would be very wary of going there. On his first fit of the corruption, he dumped a lot of infected material there. And if it has survived, it could easily eat a little creature like you. Not that it would be as dangerous as going into Pebbles itself. Also, the pearls in the waste masses inevitably attract scavengers, which can be very dangerous when provoked. But you seem to have made it out of there. Well, well. Take a look at this sparkly little room filled to the brim with pearls, and there are still more to gather. Now that we're all but completely caught up on every single pearl that we have, now we can move on to our next step in this multi-step plan. Now we can finally head back on the path that we were set on before by Five himself. We were to head, if I recall correctly from the achievement, head all the way west, past everything, and then head down, as deep as we can go. Now, of course, if we find pearls along the way, we should have more than enough passages to make our way back here with no problems at all. So, we once again find ourselves taking a very long journey along with a huge plethora of pearls and lore to go over. Compared to last time, we don't have a few pearls to read over. Instead, we have an entire collection of them to read, coming in at a whopping 10 pearls to go over, along with the previous pearls I've collected thus far to cross-reference with. Since the last episode, I've taken some time to go over the pearls again and again to try to come together with a concise thought process pertaining to what I've learned. So hopefully, I'm on the mark when it comes to the lore of this game. I think overall, there's a couple of major talking points to address, and many smaller ones to speak on as well. For starters, I'd like to talk more about this cycle thing that Moon mentions. In my previous video, I mentioned that I theorized that the cycle system that the slug cat goes through could possibly have multiple meanings. It could just be an ordinary counter, or it could literally be referring to an almost time loop of sorts, unable to truly die in a world that won't let you. In the Outskirts Pearl, Moon touches on the subject as well. Moon states that death isn't the end, and that, at least within this game, death is similar to that of a ring, or a spiral depending on who you're asking. But what Moon says afterwards is what really interests me. But the basis is agreed upon. Like sleep, like death. You wake up again, whether you want to or not. There is so much to take from just this statement alone. I'd argue that this all but confirms my time-death loop theory, but before I put my stake in that, I want to discuss it a bit more. Now, in many cases, even in real life, this mindset isn't exactly unique. So leaping to conclusions can be misleading in the video game sense. So in the instance of Rainworld, it does beg a few questions. According to Moon, it does seem like nearly everyone is affected by it in some way. Very few can break that cycle. But unfortunately, I'm just an animal going through a somewhat basic instinct, and Moon is essentially programmed to not break that cycle. But I would like to get more into the pearls individually though. The blue pearl from Industrial has some interesting world building when it comes to the ancients and the monks, and the items they possess called the mask. There's a slight grim yet poetic underlying message to this pearl aside from the history lesson brief we receive from Moon. That even in a position where you must separate oneself from the status, humanity always finds a way to rear its ugly head and create a need for bigger and more lavish things. We learn about a place called Side House. The spot is on 5 Pebbles ground according to Moon, allowing us to get an even better idea of what the locations of everything in the story is. So if I haven't acknowledged it yet, I'm assuming that the paintings found in the walls of 5 Pebbles are of those ancients with the mask on. So if there was anyone who was curious about the possible image of what they may have looked like, probably that. The garbage waste pearl has a lot to unpack. From 5 Pebbles health status to further name dropping, I found this pearl to be pretty interesting. First off, there's the mention of the Pephoritis? Not fully sure how to pronounce that. And the Slabmongers, 2 apparent groups opposed to the new form of something called Ascension. There is also the mention of Capricious Dogma, which from what I gather is similar to that of a constitution. And then there's the mention of something called Noise Milking and or Rock Swatting. At this very moment, I don't really know what to make of this part of the pearl, so my only takeaway for this part is that we now have some Rainworld vocabulary to keep track of. But then Moon comments on where I found this pearl, essentially explaining that I was digging in 5 Pebbles' trash at best and his toilet at worst. She also goes on to mention that in his first fit of corruption, he dumped a lot of infected material here. If my guess is correct, I'm assuming that Moon is referring to those nightmare spaghetti monsters found in both the bottom of garbage waste and within 5 Pebbles himself. I think from here, it is safe to assume that both of those horrifying creatures are related, but the blue ones are the evolved versions and have become significantly worse. And since we also find many pearls here at this dump site, it explains why we see such a high density of goblins in this area. We also have the pearl from the DLC place Pipe Yard. This one is relatively short and sweet. Moon recalls an old drill site north of the farm array predating her construction. This void fluid created a big boom in terms of production and innovation. She goes on to explain how to create rarefaction cells. The process was very meticulous and needed extreme precision. In later pearls, we see this void fluid stuff mentioned again, so I'll touch up more on it then. Now, we can look into the pearl found just outside 5 Pebbles. This one is interesting to me in multiple ways. The phrasing in the second line of the pearl is what really catches my eye. Although our community is blessed with an ever-shrinking population, we can almost glimpse that glorious moment when the last of us have joined our most admired peers. We must still, at all times, remain good relations with our iterator. To say you are blessed with a shrinking population, it makes me think either one or two things. Either this ascension is highly sought after and is a goal shared by many as it would free them from the cycle, or the resources are so thin that even the death of many is still considered a net positive, since it would mean that one less mouth to feed and one less body to care for. They then go on to discuss the relationship between man and machine, parent and creation, and gods to followers. Now, those of you who are sci-fi fans, this isn't an inherently unique theme to tackle. Strangely enough, this log kind of reminds me of Data from Star Trek in terms of the moral balance present when handling artificial sentient life. And aside from the absolutely scathing remark Moon makes in reference to her parents, this pearl then goes on to mention the existence of the house. You know, the house. Allegedly, there's a small group that still holds a rather large amount of power, and the one speaking in this pearl wished to see this house disabandoned. Moving right along for now, we got the yellow-looking pearl from Chimney Canopy. This pearl discusses the process of overriding genomes in order to break taboo. Now, taboos in the universe of Rainworld seem to function more like a law to the iterators, rather than a heavily looked down upon thing as one may be more familiar with. For iterators, the taboo is engraved into every single living cell in their body, making the process of removing a taboo from what I'll refer to as their cell code require a very lengthy and very risky process that, judging from the sounds of it, is what led 5 Pebbles to doing a lot of what we'll get into in a moment. But assuming once again I'm reading everything clearly, this might explain why 5 Pebbles is in the current state that he's in. So now, we find ourselves at the Sky Pearl collections. These pearls are pretty interesting to say the least. They seem to almost exclusively hold chat logs amongst multiple different time frames and moments. These pearls, I argue, are so far amongst some of the most important of the bunch we've collected thus far since we started this hunt. As a result, I feel like compared to the other pearls, I really went in on looking into these pearls and trying to squeeze out every little bit of information I could. For starters, I wanted to point out some aspects to the chat rooms as well. Some of these things aren't inherently new, like all the chat logs having a date to them, but it does further help with clearing out the timeline. There is also an indicator about whether or not the pearl is private, closed, public, or forced communication. I suppose it's not a very unique way of thinking of it, but it's comparable to public Discord servers, direct messaging, private servers, and archive servers. These chat logs also name the iterators in them, but there's a twist. Some of them have nicknames. In a few of these logs, we see the iterators refer to one another with nicknames, and they themselves set their usernames in chat to be those nicknames. For example, Looks to the Moon dubs herself Big Sis Moon, which is just so damn cute. Since these servers do have names attached to a good deal of them, I suppose my theory from earlier about just how many iterators exist is deconfirmed, seeing as how many are in the chat rooms, bumping up the number from a guess of 7 to possibly somewhere between 9 to 11. I widened my number because of a suspicion I have, but I'll get more into it later. So, finally getting into the pearls themselves, the first one to tackle is the conversation between 5 Pebbles and 7 Red Suns. 5 Pebbles questions their purpose and why they're doing what they do, especially given that it would seem all of humanity is all but gone by this point. 7 explains that they don't really have a choice, and they go on to compare the iterator's existence to that of a bug in a maze. Eventually, one will find a way out, no matter how long it takes. And 5 Pebbles responds with a very interesting line. I struggle to accept being a bug. As a YouTube commenter has mentioned before, this line goes deeper the more you think on it. From a personal standpoint, it makes me wonder if 5 was ever seen as the weaker member of the iterators, not nearly as capable compared to his peers. I can relate to the feeling of being nothing more than a small piece of someone else's great plan, with no other real choice than to just keep going, because what else can you do? If I'm honest, it stings really hard right now to hear Fi say that, since I myself find myself struggling to accept being a bug as well. And judging from the falling pearls, we're both trying to find a way to be more than that. I can sympathize with Five, but I don't think I can forgive him for what he seems he may have done to Moon. The next pearl is what I'm assuming is in chronological order, is a group seemingly specific to the subject of Sliver of Straw. First off, and this is important, there are trolls amongst the iterators. I feel a strange sense of relief knowing that no matter how different the world may be, some things remain a constant. A few of the members in this chat room seem to be discussing the triple positive given by Sliver before she died. One member in particular, EP, which we later on connected dots as being Erratic Pulse, questions whether or not Sliver was completely wrong, and comments that maybe we shouldn't rule that option out just yet. Seemingly not too soon after this pearl, the next one apparently continues in a private server, where one member, Chasing Wind, whom of which seems to be sometimes called Grey Wind, discusses Erratic Pulse and the possibility of them trying to cross themselves out, which I'm assuming is essentially like death. One member, No Significant Harassment, makes jokes about it and avoids C, to which Moon asks them to be more respectful of the sea. It was seen that she holds the voice C as an almost sacred thing, and not to be made fun of. Five Pebbles does ask where this information was gathered, but no one really answers him. Poor Five. Now, before we get into the last two pearls of Sky Islands, I first want to share a theory about Erratic Pulse, and trust me, I know this theory sounds incredibly loose, but hear me out. While writing the script, I found myself noticing something very suspicious. When looking at the lore pearls in the collection tabs, every single iterator has a different color associated with them. I'm assuming this is to help the visually impaired better read the messages, as they can sometimes get a little crowded. However, there are two iterators who share a color, Five Pebbles and Erratic Pulse. My theory is that Erratic Pulse is Five Pebbles' alt account that he's using to gather more information on whatever Sliver of Straw discovered, and see if perhaps he can ascend himself. I know basing this solely off color is absolutely wild, but I've seen other games take this method as well to hide secrets in plain sight. The first two that come to mind are Five Nights at Freddy's and God of War. So I know that this isn't an uncommon way to hide things in stories. But aside from the colorful names, Five has talked about feeling less than, wishes he was more than what he was, and apparently experimenting with things he wasn't supposed to. Out of any of our, albeit tiny suspects, Five fits the bill the most. And in these next two pearls, I do think it further proves my point. The next pearl is in a public group. Moon is explaining to the group that her neighbor, Five Pebbles, is consuming too much water, and in turn, not leaving enough for Moon. She's trying her best to contact Five and ask him to stop. But he has been unresponsive, and Moon is asking anyone to help her before it's too late. She states that if it comes down to the wire, she would use her seniority powers to force a conversation with him and request him to stop. Apparently, this isn't a pleasant feeling to get. It's like adding everyone in a Discord server. But she is slowly and painfully dying, and really needs the help. The last pearl is the aforementioned forced conversation between Moon and Five Pebbles. She first demands, and then begs Five to stop whatever it is he is doing. Five Pebbles, however, just states that the message came at the worst time possible and ruined everything. And whatever he had, it's gone now. And he will never forget this. These last few pearls honestly break my heart. It makes me sad to know that Moon was seemingly left to die, and that all of the iterators were left to rot regardless. And there's not much they can do. In more ways than one, they are truly stuck in a cycle. Not just a cycle of life and death, but the cycle of being nothing more than bugs. To my knowledge, there's only a few pearls that remain. so we may or may not already have the full story in front of us. So in the case that we do, I hope I've done a good job so far analyzing the story and that my telling isn't too far off. I look forward to seeing how this journey ends and how my viewpoint may change by the end of it. And speaking of that story, if my editing skills and my timing was right, we should be at our final destination for this episode. And in the next one, we get the luxury of traveling through a place I was instructed to go through for a while now. And hopefully having a very fun time. So thank you to everyone who listened to the very end. It means the world to me that you did so. I've been having so much fun recording these longer form scripted sections of the journey in Ringworld, and I hope you are all as well. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!